Hello everyone. My name is Dora. I'm one of the organizers of Qesher. I know many of you have seen me and know me, and there's also Sebastian here. You can find us both under the name Qesher. Our aim with this project is to bring the history, the heritage, the culture of different Jewish communities from all over the world. And of course, many of you have already attended many of our book clubs, which is kind of a side project that grew out of our main events when we introduce books that are somehow related to our main theme, which is Jewish life around the world. We are very happy to welcome today Lynn Golodner, who is the author of Cave of Secrets and many other books. She will introduce herself more in detail, and you can learn about her activities as an author. And she's going to share with us about this wonderful book today. After her presentation, of course, there will be Q&A. So if there are any questions during the talk, please put them in the chat, and we will have time after the presentation. So I'm just gonna pass the word to Lynn and share with us about
Okay.
Cave of Secrets.
All right. So can I begin by sharing my screen? Is that okay? We'll
Yes.
get started there. Great. And I will start with the slideshow. Thank you so much, Dora and Sebastian, for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm really grateful to all of you for attending. It made my day, so thank you so much. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how this book came to be and myself, and read a little bit for you. And then I'm excited for your questions, or already are some in the chat that I look forward to answering at the end. So let's get started. Okay, so where are we? There we go. All right. Oh, apologies. All right, so who am I? I'm Lynn Golodner. I live in the Detroit, Michigan area in the US, and I'm the author of 10 books. I have 2 books coming out next year, actually, a collection of personal essays and my 3rd novel. But before I did this, I was a journalist in New York City and Washington, D.C. I did an MFA in poetry at Goddard College in the 90s, which enabled me to teach writing at universities around the world, and I still continue to teach writing now. And I'm also a marketing entrepreneur. So I pivoted from journalism to marketing in 2007, and that is a company that I still run. But about 5 years ago, I decided to pivot everything that I was doing. I guess you could call it a midlife crisis or something. And I'd always said I was a writer, but it was something I did on the side. So my first 8 books were labors of love, things I did in the shadows. Other publishers put them out for me. And I said, well, when am I going to make writing my focus? And I did that about 5 years ago. So my goal was to write a book a year, and I'm on track to meet that goal and maybe surpass it. And I also created a publishing company called Scotia Road Books. It is for women with strong voices over the age of 40. And it's not my primary business, but it is something that I do to give other channels to women for their important works. And my author brand is really to focus on creating emotional novels with compelling Jewish characters for a wide audience. So I have two novels in the world. Woman of Valor came out in 2023. Cave of Secrets just came out in August. Woman of Valor is a story about an Orthodox Jewish protagonist, and a lot of non-Jewish audiences have really enjoyed it. So Cave of Secrets is not about an Orthodox protagonist, but I am hoping that not only is this of interest to Jewish readers, but widely as well. So I will say that the one reason that I decided to publish this way for my novels was because I plan to do a book a year, and the publishing industry just doesn't work that fast. But also, even before October 7th, there were sort of rumblings in the publishing industry about Jewish authors and Jewish topics not being of interest to a lot of publishers and agents. And I did not want to have to water down the Jewish content in my novels. And so I thought, because I am a marketing expert, and most authors have to do their own marketing anyway, I thought, why not see if I could try my hand at putting these books out on my own? And I have a really great team of editors and designers and everything who put the books out. So I've actually had a lot of fun doing that. And I'm so glad I decided to publish this way. So that is my story. All right, so let's talk about Cave of Secrets and where did this idea come from? Well, after I turned 50 a couple of years ago, I decided that I wanted to spend time each year in a place that I hadn't been, focusing on my writing and being there beyond just being a tourist, being somewhere, living in a house, going to the grocery, really learning the roads. And the first time that I did that was in 2022. I did a sabbatical in the Scottish Highlands. And you'll see on the screen that that little house is where I lived. It was in a little town called Tomatin, which is about 20 minutes south of Inverness. It has one cafe with a market in it, three bridges, and an amazing whiskey distillery, and that's it. Not even a gas station. So a very small town, and I absolutely loved it. And I went there, set up, started writing, and said, well, what did I come to write? I actually did not have a project in mind. I just knew I wanted to spend the month writing. And so I started researching Jews and Scotland because I write about Jewish characters and Jewish topics. And I thought, let's see what I can find. And so I stumbled upon three really interesting historical figures that I'm going to tell you about in a little bit. And they became the basis for this novel. And I actually started out writing it as historical fiction and got about 20,000 words in. And then I realized, first of all, I don't write historical fiction. I read it and I love it, but I don't usually write it. And then also, I had reached out to the descendants of two of the historical figures and asked if I could meet with them and visit their family estate. And they did not want their family members fictionalized. So, after much ado about nothing, I consulted with my attorney to see if I could still write about them. He said I could, but it might be smarter just to change the names. And I realized I want to write a contemporary story that was inspired by these historical elements. And so that's what I ended up doing. So that's sort of the basis for the book. And I'll tell you a little bit about who they inspired in terms of the characters in Cave of Secrets. And that beautiful Highland cow there was not in my yard, but was one that I did meet up close when I was in Scotland. So these are just a few of the pictures from my time there, both in 2022, and then I went back in 2023 when I was in the revisions and editing stage of working on Cave of Secrets, because this book takes place near Loch Lomond, and that was not one area that I had been to during my sabbatical in 2022. So I wanted to spend time there. And I did. And I also did a reading at one of the many lovely independent bookstores in Edinburgh. Edinburgh is a very literary city and has an amazing roster of incredible independent bookstores. And so that's me there. And it's one of my favorite places. A few of the places that factor into the story or that were inspired the story are the Culloden battlefield, which is the top left picture, and the two on the bottom on the left. That is a very famous historical battle site and turning point in Scottish history. And it was one of the first places that I went when I started my sabbatical. But it really changed the culture and the focus of Scottish life when the Brits were colonizing Scotland and ended up leading to the Highland clearances in the mid 18th century, which created a Scottish diaspora that I think is similar in a lot of ways to the Jewish diaspora, although much higher in number. But that was one of the things that really inspired me to write about Scotland, was that their culture, their food, their music, their so much about their language really inspired generations around the world to still connect with their ancestors and their roots. And so Culloden was really important in that. And then, of course, I just love this picture from the Highland Games in Inverness. And the Highland Games do factor into the story as well. So I just thought you guys might enjoy those pictures. So before I get into this story, I will answer some questions that I always get asked when I speak about my books. And people always want to know if my novels are about me. And I think most authors get asked this question. And what I can tell you is that as a writing coach and as an author myself, I have found that most first novels more closely resemble the writer than subsequent novels. And I think that's true. I think that there's a little bit more about me that inspired Woman of Valor, but there are still little tidbits in Cave of Secrets that I would say mirror my real life or were inspired by it because we write about what we know. And one of my favorite authors, Diana Gabaldon, who wrote the Outlander series, which takes place in the Scottish Highlands, she always says you write about what you know and you can learn whatever you don't know so that you can write about that as well. So, what are some of the things in this book that are similar to my life? Well, Eve, one of the main characters, is from Michigan, as is her father. And you'll find if you read my books that there's always a Michigan connection to my stories because that's where I'm from, even though I've lived in other places. As I told you, I've spent time in Scotland, not only in 2022 and 2023, but I'm in a second marriage, and my first honeymoon in the year 2000 was in Scotland. And we were Orthodox Jews at the time. And so you can imagine how challenging it might be to ship kosher food to Scotland, but we did. And it made our honeymoon possible. So I've been there 3 times. Something about Scotland really does speak to my soul. My husband now is an archivist, which is the career that Eve pursues when she leaves the States and goes for a fellowship in Scotland. And I wanted to write a very strong father-daughter relationship, which I did between Eve and her father, Sam. And I was super close with my father. So I would say those are the points in the book that are very similar to me. What's interesting is that when I said about writing this father-daughter relationship and I wanted Sam to be a single father raising his daughter, I had to figure out how that would work because if he were divorced, there would be a mother in the picture. And I did not want a mother in the picture in this book. And so you'll have to read it to see what happened to Eve's mother and how he ended up being a single father. And so there are other, I won't go into it, but you see on the screen a little bit about some of what inspired my other books as well and little bits of me that you might find in them as well. Okay, so now let's get into Cave of Secrets and the real life people who inspired actually secondary characters and themes in Cave of Secrets. So the first person was Qesher, who was the first Jewish doctor in Scotland, and he inspired the character of Benjamin. He studied at University of Edinburgh. He practiced for a bit in Scotland before moving to London, where he became one of the pillars of the Jewish community there. And a big part of his career included traveling around the world to poor Jewish communities to administer healthcare. And he was actually, those trips were funded by the Rothschild family. So what's interesting is that one of the other historical figures who inspired the character of Shira, Hannah de Rothschild Primrose. I have no evidence that I have found that they actually met, Hannah and Qesher, but it's very likely that they could have because her family foundation is really responsible for funding his global travels to bring healthcare to poor Jewish communities. So that's all speculation on my part. I really don't have any evidence of that. But Hannah was the wealthiest woman in Britain at the age of 25 when she inherited her father's estate, when she became an orphan, actually. And her family dates to the 16th century in Frankfurt. I'm sure you've heard the Rothschild name before, pretty prominent one. And in the book, actually, there is mention of the Monteith family shield, and it mentions something about the color red, a red heart in the shield. So I was sort of hinting at the red shield, which is German for Zum Rothenschild. So I know I don't speak German. I may not be pronouncing that right, but I wanted to plant little seeds of accuracy in the book that was inspired by this research. So Hannah married a Scottish lord who was not Jewish. You'll hear about him on the next slide, but they had 4 children, one of whom became Secretary of State for Scotland in 1945 under Winston Churchill. And it was interesting to read about this because Hannah was very proudly Jewish, but there was a time in the 19th century when Jews really fell out of favor in Queen Victoria's court, and marrying into the Primrose family gave Hannah access to the royal court, and she got back into the Queen's good graces through her marriage. But it was a little bit difficult for her because her mother-in-law was horrified at the idea of having a Jewish daughter-in-law. And while there's a lot of evidence that her husband loved her and it was a loving marriage, He did insist that their children be raised Christian. She never renounced her faith. She observed Judaism on her own, but did not do so with her children. She was very close with Benjamin Disraeli, who gave her away at her wedding. And she died young and sort of lonely. The relationship with her husband was more like mother and child than it was like a passionate marriage. And there's a reason for that. So her husband, Archibald Philip, who was the fifth Earl of Rosebery, is rumored to have been a closeted homosexual. And she knew about this allegedly. Again, this is all the research that I found. I don't have any firsthand evidence. And so their marriage kept his private life quiet. But his family really traces back to the 15th century, and their estate, the Dalmany estate, is on the banks of the River Forth in West Edinburgh. I've actually driven past it. I have not visited it, but you can visit it in the summer. It's open to the public. And he had a very active political career and was even the Prime Minister of the UK for 1 year at the turn of the 20th century. Apparently not a very good one from what I read, but he was impactful. He coined the term the British Commonwealth of Nations, and he was essential in really changing the face of British election campaigning, taking his cues from the American political landscape. And so these three characters, these three people inspired secondary characters. So Asher inspired Benjamin, Hannah inspired Shira, and Archibald inspired the character of Hugh. And then all the rest of the characters really came from my imagination. So these are all secondary characters, and their relationships and their history loosely chronicle some of the research and then sort of go off in a creative fiction tangent from there. These are some photos of the current estates for both the Primrose and Rothschild families. So the Dalmany house on the left is the traditional Primrose estate outside of Edinburgh. And the Metmore estate on the right is in England. It's the Rothschild estate. And they're both still standing and have quite a lot of art collections and historical artifacts. And I do believe that you can tour them as well. So I returned in 2023 to Scotland when I was working on the revision and the editing of this novel because I needed some additional on-the-ground research, and that was a really, really fun trip. And so what you see here are some of the photos from that time. So on the right, the two photos are the interior and the exterior of the Oak Tree Inn, which is in Balmaha, which is on the shores of Loch Lomond, and that's what the Monteith is based on. And that is where I stayed when I went there. I also hiked up Connacht Hill, which is a real hill, a real hiking trail, which you'll see on the left. And that is a very steep stone staircase about 2/3 of the way up. It was a very difficult hike. And it actually, you get to a point up at the top where you're looking out over Loch Lomond and you sort of are looking along the fault line. And to the right is the highlands and to the left is the lowlands. And there are little islands in Loch Lomond that sort of outline that fault line, which is really, really cool. There is no cave that I know of on Connacht Hill. That is imagined and creative in this novel, and it's pretty essential to the story. But to my knowledge and my experience of being there, there is no actual cave. Okay. So people do ask me why I am so into Scotland, and I don't know if it's just that it's a beautiful place. I love oceans and mountains, and they have both. I find the people really warm and friendly, and I will answer that question in the chat later about how is it with anti-Semitism in today. But I did embark on an ancestry DNA journey to see if perhaps I have any lurking Scottish blood in my ancestry. So my kids laughed when I got the results, which you see on the screen. 98% Ashkenazi Jewish. And they said, "Were you surprised, Mom?" And I really wasn't. But I will say that that 1% Denmark, I'm really holding on to and saying, well, you know, Denmark, I mean, the Vikings, they went to Scotland. There was a migration. And so I'm going to say that I have 1% of Viking blood that ended up in Scotland, and that's inspired my love for Scotland. But other than that, I just happen to really see a lot of alignment between the Jewish diaspora, the Scottish diaspora, and the richness of the culture and the community, which continues to inspire me. The other thing that I discovered in my research was that there is an official Jewish tartan. And that's a little swatch of it. I actually have two pieces that I purchased. One is a tam, which is a hat with a little poof on top in the Jewish tartan, but I also have a big cape as well. And it's just a really, really beautiful pattern. And it's a pretty recent addition to the Scottish Tartans Authority, but it is official and recognized. And there's a lot of significance and symbolism in the colors and in the patterns. So you can see a lot of it on the screen there. One of the things that I find um, most symbolic, I guess, for me and heartwarming is that there are two different blues and there is a thread of white going through it as well. And the more royal blue, which you can see sort of in the T in the swatch, is meant to represent both the Scottish flag and the Israeli flag. The Scottish flag is called the Saltire, and it is referenced in the book. And of course, the Israeli flag as well. So the blue and white of both are represented in the tartan, in addition to other significant symbolism and imagery that relates to Jewish history and culture. So what I'd like to do now, if you don't mind, is to read you a little bit from the book, and then I can answer some of your questions and take some new ones as well. So I'm going to read two excerpts. The first one begins on the very first page, and I think it's really important to set the story. So I'll start there. And this is in Eve's perspective, and it starts July 2014. And by the way, this book takes place between 2014 and 2016. And Dora had asked me why I said it then. And of course, I had to think and remember. And the reason that I did was I did not want the pandemic to factor into the story. And also, as after October 7th, I didn't really want to address that either. So I stayed away from it and went a little bit earlier in the teens. And also, I think it's important to know that there are four protagonists in this book. There's Eve and her father, Sam, and then Mac, which is her love interest, and his mother, Margaret. So Mac and Margaret are Scottish, and they come from the aristocracy, and Eve and Sam are American. They are from Michigan. Sam was raised Orthodox, but he did not raise Eve that way, and Sam is actually gay, and so that impacted how he raised Eve as well. All right, let's begin. This is chapter 1, and it's Eve in July of 2014. If Eve had known a storm was coming, she wouldn't have set out on a 4-mile hike through the forests around Loch Lomond. But she was 2 miles in as a rush of cool air pimpled her arms. The first drops fell cold on her face, and she scanned beyond the trail for a place to shelter as a crack of thunder split the dark sky and fat raindrops drenched her hair. Before the rain pelted down, Eve had sat on the nub of a hill and stared over the fault line, the trace from the summit all the way down to the loch, and along 3 islands evenly spaced in the glassy water, the dividing line between the highlands and the lowlands, the line between the person she had been and the person she was about to become. She had no time to pull out the gray rain jacket she'd bought before coming to Scotland because it promised to be easily packable and lightweight. It was balled up in her backpack, and as the skies opened up, she didn't want to stop to find it and risk drenching the notebook she took everywhere to jot down thoughts and questions for future research. Eve ran into a thicket of trees, ducking under the fragrant arms of an evergreen for cover. She was at the plateau in the climb, with a perfect view of the black water which drank in the rain. The soil under her feet darkened as it turned gummy with mud. Deeper into the trees, Eve spotted an opening, and she went for it, darting beneath branches and over knotty roots until it came clearer into view. The cave was wide and quiet and humid. Ducking inside, she sank to the ground to catch her breath, sliding off her pack and dropping it in the dirt as her eyes adjusted to the darkness. "Hello," she called, her voice rippling back to her in echoes. The cave calmed her and warmed her prickling flesh. Heat emanated from the slate walls. The ground was flat and moist, the silence soothing. After a few minutes, Eve walked deeper in. She shook the rain from her arms like a dog wringing out fur. The storm was unlikely to go long. She would wait until the rain slowed and the skies brightened, and then she'd tread carefully down the slick mountain paths. 100 yards into the belly of the cave, and somehow she could see better. Light was coming from somewhere inside, a cleft in the mountain that created a skylight. Still, she pulled a flashlight from her bag, glad she'd remembered to pack it. Spotlighting the space, she saw she wasn't the first person to seek shelter here. Burnt logs and broken twigs were scattered in an alcove where someone had lit a fire to keep warm. She grazed her fingers along a piece of wood, dry and brittle. The fire hadn't been recent. Farther still, flat boulders had served as a tabletop. Toffee and biscuit wrappers left by careless hikers littered the surface. Eve stuffed them in her pockets to dispose of later. The dim light glinted off a flat surface where the rock wall met the sandy floor. Eve knelt closer, trying to see what had caught the light. A leather-bound satchel lay half buried, half revealed in the dirt. She poked into the soil, drawing open the earth. Palming the package, she slowly peeled it open to peer inside. The pages were smooth and not too soil-streaked, the letters faded but readable. The first page read like a letter, though there was no date to identify when or by whom. Eve squinted in the low light to make out the words, which brushed across the page in elegant, formal script. The author certainly had exquisite penmanship. My darling Benjamin, I have counted the days until you would return to my waiting arms, my insistent kisses. But now I know you never will. The telegram arrived to the Foundation offices in London, and a messenger ferried it to me here. News of your demise, your sinking at sea. Oh, my dear Benjamin, how will I continue without you? I write here in the privacy of my rooms all the things I wish I could say aloud. I can tell no one that this baby I carry is yours. No one to wail to about the loss of my life's love. Hugh suspects, of course, for we have lived as sister and brother all these many years since I found you and released him to his secrets. But he will wear the face of father for this baby, who will never know his true lineage, never know his kind, patient, selfless father, whom I loved more than I have ever loved anyone. Now that you've gone to your eternal rest, I will go about the business of raising my children, the last of whom will carry your gleaming smile, your tender eyes, your open heart, your giving soul. I will hold you in my heart always, along with the memories of our enduring love. I pray that the brief time we had will be a beacon, brightening my days and softening my nights as I gaze at the round moon alone, without your tender touch, without a companion, without you, my darling. I remain forever yours, Shira. So that's how the book opens, and clearly finding that satchel, that journal, sends Eve into a whole pursuit in the book, which you will read about as you get that story and see where it takes you. And I'd like to read you a little bit from a chapter later on in the book, and I don't think it gives away too much. I don't think it does. This is in Margaret's voice, and it's a year or so later, maybe 8 months. And it's from chapter 36, and so I will read a little bit about it. So it gives you a sense of Margaret and her family. You've made a right mess of everything. Max stormed into the family home the next evening. Margaret was alone in the small study reading. Alex was out. She hadn't asked where, and he hadn't specified. The lights were low, reflecting in the leaded glass windows that steamed from the heat inside against the cold of the winter night. Margaret looked at her son, knowing full well what he was ranting about. Control yourself, son, she said in a steady voice. Monteiths don't behave this way. I'll bloody behave however I want. Stop carrying on like a child. She didn't move from the chaise, where her manicured toes glowed in the light of the hearth. Even at night, even at home alone, Margaret was impeccably attired. Slim black pants, a warm red crewneck sweater, and the ever-present single strand of Scotch pearls. Her fingernails matched her toes, and her lips shimmered with gloss. Mac fumed. Someone had to put a stop to this nonsense, Margaret said, reaching for her cut crystal tumbler of whiskey and swallowing it in one gulp. I won't have some nosy American rummaging in the attic of our ancestors and writing a book about it for all the world to read. I won't have it. Mac sat on the end of the chaise and leaned in close. Eve is the love of my life, and because of this family, I can't be with her. We never even met her, So I don't see how we can be the cause of your relationship's demise, his mother said. And if she was the love of your life, why aren't you with her now? She walked to the fireplace to watch the licking flames. Don't play games with me, Mother. You know what you're doing. And you know that your voice in my head is what ended this relationship. I didn't realize I had such influence over you, she said. I'm relieved, actually. I thought I had no impact on my children. While she remained calm on the outside, inside her heart pounded. Withdraw the lawsuit immediately, Mac demanded. She shook her head. It isn't in the best interests of this family to have our long hidden secrets exposed. Withdraw it. She stared at him. Or what? Or you'll lose me. Forever. She kept smiling even though she didn't really feel it. She stared at her son, wondering if he meant it. Scots were so damn hot-blooded. They said things in the heat of a moment but didn't always follow through. But if he were serious, she couldn't lose her golden boy. Colin might be the heir apparent, but Mac was the wonderkind, her silent favorite. She hadn't worked this hard to build up the family line to let it all go. And he would do it. Her son never said a word he didn't mean. While all these thoughts pinged inside her head, Margaret kept her even gaze and held her son's eyes with her own. She would not show weakness. She would leave him thinking that this was the best stance for the family and he'd better fall in line. Except inside, she was quaking. This is not the moment to grow weak, Margaret reprimanded herself. Not the time to show heart or love. She waited until he stormed out to release her breath in a whoosh of air. She crumpled to the floor, heaving with silent sobs. She'd worked so hard to build her family, but in the end, she was all alone. So I think I might want to stop there and answer some questions, if that's okay with you, Dora. Is that okay? Yeah?
Sure. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to listen to you present and share this world with us. And now I'm going to read some questions that came
Great.
in the chat.
Okay.
So some technical question, is it in paperback and is it in libraries? Does it have a discussion guide in the book? So a bit about
Yes.
this.
Yes, so the book right now is available in paperback and ebook. Anywhere, it's ebook only on Amazon. It's paperback anywhere you buy books. And there is a discussion guide on my website. And so I will put that link in, I guess, tomorrow's email. Dora will send that out. So the discussion guide is downloadable. I do speak to book clubs virtually and in person. In fact, I'm speaking to one tomorrow and I did one last week. And so the discussion guide is helpful for that. And the audiobook should be out by February 1st. So if you're waiting for that, it's coming soon and it is available in libraries. You may have to request it if it's not in your local one. And even if you've already read it, go request it because then they'll buy it and that's what we want. So yes, it's available there.
Thank you. So can people in the audience get in touch with you to invite you to their book clubs?
Absolutely. I would love to. Yes.
Okay, so we'll share Lynn's email address also in the follow-up email. So anyone who's interested in that, you can get in touch.
Yes. I will
Another
say also one little thing for book clubs, if you want to buy the books directly from Scotia Road Books, there's a volume discount for purchasing more than 7 copies at once. And so some book clubs have done that as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
So you mentioned in the beginning this backlash against Jewish authors or Jewish content. So there was a question, in light of the backlash against Jewish authors, have you experienced any anti-Semitism because of your Jewish topic books?
Actually, thankfully, no. I'm so thrilled that I've had a wide acceptance of both of my books. And the first book came out 10 days before October 7th, actually, Woman of Valor. And it's done very well. And Cave of Secrets has done even better. And a majority of my readers are not Jewish. And so that makes me feel a little bit better that maybe there are trends happening, on a global scale and in the industry, but on the, down low, day-to-day people are actually very open and interested in learning about Jewish culture and Jewish identity. And it hasn't seemed
Sorry.
It hasn't, that's okay. It hasn't seemed to be in any way a barrier, hopefully, and I hope it continues that way.
Great, thank you so much. I'm gonna read two comments that came in related to the characters you shared about.
Mhm.
So someone shared with us that this past Sunday, Remembrance Sunday of the World Wars in England, I was on a tour and I saw the grave of Hannah the Rothschild's son, who died in World War One. He's buried
Wow.
in the British cemetery in Ramle, Israel, and she may have a photo. We'll see. Maybe she can send it to us or share it with us.
Amazing. If you do have a photo, send it to me too in my email. I would love that. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll try to encourage
Dora,
that.
Dora,
Yes. Okay,
it's
here she
Marion.
is. Marion, please go ahead and
I've just sent the photograph to you. I don't know how else to send it.
oh, great. Okay.
Um,
So if you sent
so
it to
if you
me,
can
I
pass it on
maybe
to Lynn.
yeah, and
Great.
I haven't did you send it to Qesher? Because
Yes,
I don't
info
see
at
it
Qesher.
now, but as soon as it arrives, I'll try to share the screen with everyone.
Okay,
Great.
thank you. Now,
It arrived.
I just want to make a comment about this gravestone. In the Ramley British Cemetery, most of the people buried there are not Jewish. There were non-Jewish soldiers who fought in the First World War and the Second World War.
Okay.
Now, because Hannah's son was technically Jewish, he
Yes.
should have had a Magen David on his gravestone. And it hasn't yet been proven. That they seem to have to be able to prove it in different ways, whether he was actually halachically Jewish with all the paperwork and everything. And once it's proven, then the gravestone will be changed to one with a Magen David.
Very nice.
So that's
Thank
why
you
it has
so
a
much.
cross on it.
Wonderful.
Thank
Okay.
you. I hope
Have you
people
got
saw
it, Dora?
the
Have you
pictures.
received it?
Yes, I shared it just now. Was it visible?
No,
Yes.
I
Okay.
can't
So
see it. Okay.
no, now I stopped the sharing, but people are nodding, so people saw it, and I'll send it to Lynn later on.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Marion. And there was another comment that Lady Rosebery is buried in Willesden Jewish Cemetery, which is certainly worth a visit, where many of the great and the good are also interred. So that
Thank
was
you.
another comment. You spoke about this a little bit in the beginning, but if you want to add to that, is this book nonfiction, a novel, or historical fiction? Like, what is the exact genre?
Yeah, it's fiction. It's entirely fiction. Though it was inspired by real people, it's completely a fictitious story. And it's contemporary fiction with a little bit of magical realism and a little bit of suspense and some historical characters, but the bulk of the story is contemporary.
Thank you. Okay, so there's a question if you could speak about Jewish life in Scotland and anti-Semitism there.
Yeah, so I actually have some stats that I should have put in the presentation, but I will put it. I'm just opening it up right now to tell you. So there have been Jews in Scotland since the 13th century when they were expelled from England. That was the first documentation, 1290, when Jews were in Scotland. But the first organized Jewish community was not created there until 1816 in Edinburgh. And in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, there was mass immigration from Eastern Europe, and so many Jews came to Glasgow. And today, there are 6 synagogues and a Jewish archives in Glasgow, 2 synagogues in Edinburgh, and 2 in Aberdeen. And at the height of its population in about the 1930s. The Scottish Jewish community numbered about 20,000, and the latest census in 2011 was that there were 6,000 Jews still in Scotland. It's obviously shrunk a lot, and there's been a lot of emigration to Israel. When I've been there, I've not experienced any anti-Semitism. I can't speak to what it's like today. I have not been there since October 7th. And in fact, I was supposed to go back in April, and I had the opportunity to go to Israel and to volunteer during the war, and so I did that instead, and I did not end up going back to Scotland. So it would have been interesting to see, but I will be in the UK in March for some book tour events, and so I'm eager to see what it'll be like then, and who knows. I will say that from my understanding, it's not as like it is in Ireland, which tends to be very anti-Israel, and there's a strong wave of anti-Semitism. But I did hear something, and I don't know who this was from, about offering to the Palestinians to relocate to the Scottish Highlands. I don't know if that was just a comment in jest or if it was a real offer. I don't think it's happening. And I don't know if there is anti-Semitic undertones today. So I'm not really sure at this time.
Thank you very much. And a little additional question to that from my part. I'm about halfway through the book, so I haven't finished it yet, but I read already a good chunk of it, and I really enjoyed the parts when you introduce the different Jewish communities. Actually, like that you actually speak about the different locations and the different synagogues and how the people are there. And so I just wanted to ask, like, did you have real experience with that? How was your research in terms of visiting these synagogues, visiting the people, the archives? Like, what was your own personal experience?
Yeah. So when I went back in 2023, I was there over Shavuot, and so I couldn't go to the archives in person, but I've been in touch with them remotely during the course of writing the book. They just weren't open when I was there, but that it's all based on research. So the representation of the synagogues and the community in Garnet Hill, the suburb of Glasgow, is accurate. Edinburgh is a little smaller population and a little more liberal based on the university's presence there. So that's all based on reality as well. And I was invited for Shabbat in Aberdeen, which has a university and a synagogue. And so, that was really very interesting. I had found sort of I don't know if it was a chavurah or a loose collective of a Jewish community throughout the Highlands, and I really, really wanted to meet them. And they didn't, it's sort of more of like a confederation of people sort of sprinkled throughout the Highlands, which is quite big and really hard to get to. There's not like a synagogue or anything, and they don't really do much in the summer. So when I was there, they weren't meeting, but they were very friendly and very communicative. And so there are Jews sprinkled throughout the country. But I would say if you're looking for Shabbat, if you're looking for kosher food, Glasgow is your only place. If you're looking for Shabbat to celebrate with people, it's either Edinburgh, Aberdeen, or Glasgow. Those are your options.
Thank you. So if there are any other questions that you'd like to ask from Lynn, like you can open up your mic or you can put them in the chat. So while we wait for that, I'll just give you a little program of the week. So this Thursday, we're going to have a very interesting session about shtetls, which is actually part of a 3-part series. The first one will give a general overview of what shtetl life was, and then next week we'll continue with the second part, which will be a virtual tour of some specific shtetls throughout the past Pale of Settlement. And the third one will be about childhood in the shtetl. So that's a very interesting topic as well. How did children live in these places? And on Sunday, we have another event about it. It's going to be another book club about Cuba. It's called Letters from Cuba by Ruth Behar. And it's also going to, will present a trip to Cuba in May 2025, which is based on her book. So if you're interested in that, please feel free. That's a free event. You can join us just like today. Nahum, his hand is up, so please open your mic and go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have an anecdote, a story. I have a weak spot for the Scottish and the Jewish Scotland. I was there once in the 80s. I was involved in a theater production in Dundee,
Mm,
and I was the host by a wonderful Scottish family. However, it was the Israeli Independence Day, and I decided to go to from Dundee to Glasgow because I find out there must be an event or something to celebrate Israel Independence Day. And on
mhm,
the train, there was a young man with a yarmulke on him. So I approached him and I asked him if he know exactly if there is an event and where is it. He said, I don't know anything about it.
mm,
So I went to the event. I find out with my companion, and this particular guy was the head of. He has a booth there for Bnei Akiva for the Jewish youth movement.
mm,
Uh, and I asked him why he didn't want to talk to me, and he said there is a lot of anti-Israeli sentiment in
mm,
Glasgow. In the university, there were riots, and the dean himself has to be intervened to suppress the riots.
mhm,
However, the people was extremely, extremely nice everywhere I went,
mhm.
and that's what I want to tell you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I do know that for people who are really strong on Scottish independence from England, from the UK, they are sympathetic to the Palestinians. But like you, I didn't really experience anything firsthand when I was there. But I can see where that would happen. Yeah.
Thank you, Nahum, for the comment. I don't see now more questions. There was a question to us. We will be sending out follow-up information tomorrow, so you will receive Lynn's email address, website, where you can buy the book. Lynn, do you want to say just a couple of words about the writers' meetings that you share with us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I do teach writing extensively and with people all over the world joining in. And once a month, I host a free monthly write along. So if writing is of interest to you and you'd like to write in community on Zoom, that is a link that Dora and Sebastian will share in tomorrow's email. And you're welcome to sign up for the reminders. It's free, it's once a month. This year it's on Saturdays, and in 2025 it'll be on Sundays. And so we meet at 11 a.m. Eastern time, so we can accommodate most time zones. My friends in Australia can't join, but everybody else can. So we would love to have you there. It'd be a lot of fun.
So this will also be a link that we will share, and the upcoming events that I just spoke about, you can find them on our website. I put the link in the chat, but we will also share them with you tomorrow. So you will have a lot to follow up on, and of course, the recording of today's event will also be included. So if you miss part of it or you want to share it with other people, you will have the chance tomorrow. Do you publish any children's books?
Oh, so Scotia Road Books, my publishing company, publishes contemporary and historical fiction, memoir, and uh, not poetry yet. We're thinking about publishing poetry, but it's mostly contemporary historical fiction and memoir. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see that many people are commenting that they look forward to reading the book, so hopefully many will find out more and read and like it, and invite you to book clubs as well.
Thank you so
So
much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
thank you for presenting to us. I don't see now more questions, so
Okay.
we will close for today. I see a comment coming in now. Another person with a affinity to Scotland. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you here, and we will be in touch
Thank you.
tomorrow with all the details. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
very nice rest of the day. And
Bye.
good night for those who are in Europe or Israel.